Okay. All right, let's get this presentation on the road. Hi, everyone from Writing Group. Um, I decided to do something a little more fun, rather than workshopping a piece, and the, the vain attempt of, completing something. I decided just to do some pitches for all of you. Now, I kind of wanted to do more originally, get some concept art or, just like stock photos in general, just to give you the vibe. I tried to do that, but I just could never really work up like a good collage for what I wanted to do. So maybe I'll do that in the future if we ever revisit this idea. But for now, what you're going to get is basically blurbs that you would find on the back of books that I was just tooling around with basically yesterday. Um, which story ideas am I going to present with you? I'm going to present you five, and I'm going to introduce them as they come. Um, let me see. I was originally going to do six, but then I was like, this is too much. So yeah, five of main story ideas, some of which you guys have encountered before. There might be. No, I think you guys have encountered all of them. So to varying degrees in this group. So without further ado, these pitches, you can feel free to read them on the screen. There's also, I posted them on the Facebook meetup, and I also texted it to some of you. So if you'd rather read it there, I'm going to use them as guidelines. So here we go. Okay, the first story centers around a character named Rosario. She was once a starch. I did it again. A staunch prohibitionist who these days she works for the very mobs who have torn her country apart in this war to get people the liquor that they want so desperately. Um, she herself is a person who is cursed to be unable to live without liquor, but the liquor also gives her magical abilities. She's known as a card. The gangs around the country, they all have their own set of cards. Each of these people are able to draw from different types of liquor. Like some are able to draw from wine, others are able to draw from beer, and they're able to do various different abilities depending on what they can draw from. Um, her, but like in terms of the war, in terms of which gang is on top, all this is kind of far from her mind because she's about to go on vacation to go see her sister. She just has to do one last job. Basically, some people who stole stuff from the mob, who used to be members of these various gangs, probably lower level, from what I remember of what I wrote. Then she has to track them down, find what they stole, and then she can go on vacation. But this job does go awry, um, and she not only has to track these people down, but is reunited with someone from her past. And let's just say the results are really sad, explosive, and all kinds of trauma. So that's the first story, the Ruby Duchess. So, Jody.
Questions?
Yeah, yeah. As we go on, you guys can ask questions.
Okay,
So,
so I have a couple here.
okay.
So first, is this, you mentioned in the top paragraph about the country to heal, but you're talking about games, which feels more local. So how do you combine those two ideas?
Uh, let me see. I think I might need to make it a bit more local. I This story is very much based on our own Prohibition era, and yeah, like I guess when I mentioned country, I was like, this feels a bit too broad. Like maybe if I said something like city of Chicago or something, though it is its own world. Um, good question, Jody. Though I will say, we're gonna pretend like you guys are my boardroom full of people I'm pitching this idea for. So at the end, you guys are gonna vote on which ones you like the most. But during the presentations, once I give it, or even during it, feel free to ask questions based on what you see or what I don't see. Marty, go ahead.
Um, play on words of her being a card in the decks of games. Is that going to be something you're playing with? Card?
Yeah. Actually, that's a very good question. So Marty just asked if the wordplay of card in the description and the gangs having various decks of these people, if that's going to be a factor. Yeah. In short, yes, because in terms of what you're able to do with the magic system, that is in relationship to you being like a jack, a queen, a king. Um, I believe an ace is able to draw from one. Kings and queens are able to draw from two, and then
Types of liquor.
yeah, types of liquor, and jacks, jack of all trades. I made it that they're able to do three and up. So yeah.
Is this the only magic in this world?
Uh,
Or is it a magical world?
right now, this is the only magic system I have for this country. So.
I feel like alcohol is anonymous, but
Yeah. No.
A tiny bit of feedback off of what Marty just asked.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm thinking about the value of cards. A jack is worth less
Mm-hmm.
than a king or a queen. And so to give the jack the ability, I get jack of all trades, but to give the jack the ability to handle multiple liquors, that makes the jack ultimately more powerful.
That's not what I heard you say.
Yeah, I said three or
You said
more for
jack
jacks,
and
and
three
queens and kings have two. So, yeah. Thank you for that, Claire. I mostly used it for jack of all trades being just playing words, you know. As I go along with the story, huh? Oh.
He is the knave.
Yeah. Totally. But as I go along with the story, I might do more with that. It just kind of depends on the story. Even as I was writing these pitches, I was coming up with new angles for the story to take on. A lot of these have been pretty dormant for the most part, but for you guys, you have read the beginning portion, and I've read out loud the ending after someone encouraged me just to write the ending.
I have a suggestion.
Go ahead, Ethan.
Kings and queens can combine the power of two alcohols and get both of those magics at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Jack can have one power at a time for multiple alcohols.
That might be good. Yeah, I would actually. Ethan was recommending that that kings and queens are able to combine their magics, whereas jacks are only able to use one at a time. So for you, Ethan, I think I would once I get these stories off the ground, I would like you to poke holes in my magic systems. Since I like to do a very hard magic system, I like to know the rules. So those are always fun to do. So anyone have any other questions?
Last question.
Go ahead.
You said, I absolutely understand that she gets magic from drinking alcohol. Does her life truly depend on it? Like she's going to die if she doesn't drink?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that is a major conflict of this story. So, we like to talk about alcohol dependency, but my thought with this world and this magic is, what if you literally could not live without alcohol?
you might want to consider
Yes.
making it some kind of substance other than
Spice.
alcohol.
In a lot of fantasy, that there's always substitutes. Like in this series called Powder Mage, it's gunpowder and they snort it. I don't know. I guess I wanted to be more direct. What's your argument against that?
Well, my argument against it is you're going to find it very hard to market a book that has characters that can't live with alcohol in a world where addiction is taken very seriously in modern society. And I think you would get a lot of shit for that.
Yeah, I probably would. I guess it'll depend on how the story plays out. One of the things I didn't mention in terms of the limitation is that when they use their magic, they're able to burn through the alcohol. So I go from being drunk to being completely sober, right? But one of the major problems with that is that your liver still treats it the same. So it's like something that would take you like, I don't know, a couple hours, it's gone in an instant. And for these people, every time they use their magic, they get in worse health. So I wanted to keep those limitations in mind, but I completely get what you're coming from.
I have to agree with Heather. I think the discomfort of alcohol being a real thing in our world
Mhm.
with problems could be avoided if you come up with some other creative thing to accomplish the same story.
Well, would you guys have the same problem if it was just like potions?
Yeah, it could be in a world that has a certain vein of mind material that leads to this, or different types of minerals that lead to this, or
Bark of rare trees. Materia, like in the Final Fantasy series.
Maybe.
Gems that they can somehow use, absorb.
Or make it more interesting to have it like be some kind of herb or plant that has been like harvested to near extinction.
something that
Creating
fell
a
with a
scarcity.
meteorite.
Yeah, like I definitely do like the prohibition idea in terms of this magic. Um,
You can still do that with.
I know, it's just that
I mean, for fuck's sake, they did it with marijuana for centuries.
True, that is a thing. But I don't know, something about it feels like a cop out. Um, this one at the moment is mostly like a novella. That's what I would consider right now once I'm done with it. I'm not too sure about expanding it into a full novel or even a full series. I think the world has some potential for that, but yeah.
So, two quick things.
Go ahead, Jody.
The first is, I think it depends on how frequently they have to consume liquor to survive.
Mhm.
Because if it's that they constantly have to have liquor in their system, that would be, I think for today's society, that would be a pretty significant problem for you to be able to market. If it's that they have to consume liquor at least once a month or once a week or once a something, right? Then maybe you can get away with it, but I do share the concerns that Morgan and Heather have raised. Yeah, and then drink it all the time. Don't I know. Drink and drive your carriage.
Well, one of the
But the frequency, I think, is a key part of what you would need to clarify.
for sure. Well, one thing I was gonna ask is another limitation I was thinking about introducing with this magic system is that it's not necessarily something you're born in, it's more due to your actions. So if certain people drink too much, they risk becoming one of these cards.
Okay, so you just solved one of my problems. Because what I was going to say is, I have a couple of friends who have taken medications in their life that once you start the medication, you are never allowed to get off.
Yeah.
And so I can see where you could have something that you have to take for the rest of your life. And I was going to ask the question of why would they create this prohibition against something that people need to survive, unless, as you say, it's a self-inflicted thing, and so if they never started drinking it, then they would never develop the problem to start.
I think a lot of these answers would probably be solved in terms of my research because I am basing this on our own Prohibition era. That's kind of why I'm having the main character in her past having been, prohibitionist, and essentially where the novella would be about is one of these peoples that she's hunting out turns out to be her brother-in-law. And this brother-in-law had, through his own dependency on alcohol, had killed her sister. And so you guys might remember this scene I wrote where she meets him in a graveyard, and then she kills him for taking her sister's life. So I think you'll notice with a lot of these, like I like an emotional gut punch at the end. So, yeah.
I just have a question. I'm trying to visualize the setting. Is this going to look like a medieval type setting?
No, it would be more like gunpowder Western Age.
What was that?
Gunpowder Western Age. That's what it would be.
So are we talking like steampunk or something?
Something like that. I was thinking more like 1920s America too. So
That's what I'm wondering.
mhm.
Just to visualize it.
Yeah.
See, Cisco fixed the gunpowder western was
No. See, I'm combining a couple things.
Okay.
That's why. So might not actually work. It made me feel like Frankenstein. Go ahead, Jody.
Final question for me.
Okay.
Is she an assassin?
That's one of her jobs. It just depends on what the mob wants her to do.
Because she's got someone in her scope side already.
Exactly.
Okay. Mhm. All right, on to the next one. The second story is Lancer. Now, this one is based on the Haitian Revolution, essentially. So, for this one, the premise is, the conditions of the Somerset Isles, they're the worst in terms of any of the slave states in the modern age. So much so that it's easier for them to bring in new slaves than it is waiting for the slaves to reproduce naturally. So, but even amongst these people, they're still able to rebel, even as downtrodden as they were. So the main character would be Sandé. So her role used to be that she was part of a class that was neither slave nor part of the master group. She is a mixed race woman who one day, through varying circumstances, she discarded her privilege and decided to join the revolution to help people she once saw as separate from herself. So, and as the story begins, she and her partner, Mela, sorry, that they're being called into a big battle that's currently being led by Sunday's mother. So, and the masters are called reinforcements, and their emperor is keen to make an example out of them. So, yeah. This is a story you guys have encountered before. I remember it was during a Zoom call. A lot of people thought it was based on the American Revolution, when in actuality it's Haitian, but
So this is historically based, or is this going to be pure fantasy?
Here it's based on the Haitian Revolution in its own world. So yeah. That's how I come at it with a lot of my ideas. I like to draw from history a lot, which the last one is based on Prohibition. This one's based on the Haitian Revolution. So, okay, forward.
So, is there magic involved in this?
Yes, but I decided in terms of what I was going to describe that the conflict in the slaves was a little more important to me. Their magic, Sunday is what's known as a lancer, and what they do is like through various means, their magic is fueled by their memories. So depending on how powerful the magic they want to use, requires like maybe like what I had for coffee yesterday, or maybe it's something more vital, like someone very important to me. Like I'll forget about that as soon as I'm done using my magic. So,
So you use up your memories to cover your magic.
yep.
Wow.
And eventually, for these people, like they're they eventually like it's like a mental illness, so they slowly start losing all their faculties, and like if you use too much of the magic, you can even forget like how to breathe, how to your eye. Yes. Yeah.
Wow. That's really interesting. I think you should have that in the summary.
Mm-hmm.
The pitch summary.
Yeah.
Because that's a key part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the. This is one of the stories that's like I'm very much in conflict between the magic and what the character is able to do. And for Marty, or before he asked me if the other one had two magic systems or more than that, this one does. The other magic is called Forgers, I believe, and they're able to, what was it again? They're able to draw from their emotion. So eventually they become emotionless husks if they use their magic too much.
So I think to me,
Mm-hmm.
it seems like there are several key pieces to whether or not this would be my and at the end,
Mhm.
based on things like what is it that's holding people down? Why are things so violent? Who is the emperor that has any sort of say in it?
Mhm.
How do they keep control over people? So what are they really fighting against? I get that it's a brutal world.
Mhm.
That's been described in so many different stories in so many different ways, though. That doesn't tell me why I should want to read this book,
Mhm.
right? So I think that knowing more about what makes this vital
Mhm.
and how people would fight against it using lancers, using forgers, whatever,
Mhm.
is going to be key as to whether or not I want to pick this up.
No, for sure. That makes
And
sense.
does the other side have those magics as well? Right.
So the Lancers would be the magic of the slaves, and Forgers would be the magic of the masters.
Wow. So you have people who are masters who have absolutely no emotion. I feel kind of that sounds like being led by psychopaths. No.
Or AI.
Yeah.
Also,
Anyone have any other questions left? Go ahead, Alan.
Just to explore the memory loss aspect, which I think is kind of a real selling point.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way that that could be used against someone else? It's kind of like the old story of, we've seen some wars where actually they just said, we'll rush the hill because we know they only have so much ammo and they can only kill so many.
Mm-hmm.
Where, we could literally say, well, let's force them to use all this, turn themselves up.
That could be a thing in terms of finding more than one way to use it. Because like my also thought is just like as like if you know you're going to be captured, you just burn yourself out. So yeah, that's a really good point, Alan.
You have a theory of why there's two different kinds of magic for the two different classes of people?
I think it's more when I was brainstorming it, it's based on their cultures and their origin, because like I mentioned, this is based on Haitian history, and so the forgers and the masters in general, they're based on the French. So the emperor, yes, the emperor would be Napoleon. So
one other thing about this, just as I'm reflecting on this kind of world,
sure.
if I'm a forger, or a lancer,
Mhm.
it would incentivize me to try to make as many memories or to have as many and as wide a variety of emotions as possible.
Yep.
Chasing the high.
They're chasing the high. Both of them are chasing the high.
Yeah.
And that that's fascinating, but that would be, and I can't imagine being a kid in that
Mm-hmm.
kind of a scenario.
So, depending from what I'm hearing, you guys, based on what I'm describing in the magic, that feels a little more interesting than the revolution part.
Okay, so for a fantasy book that I'm going to pick up,
Mhm.
I need to be sold on magic.
Okay.
Katie's history is sad as anything, right? I mean, so anything like this that is based on that could be fascinating in and of itself,
Mm-hmm.
but really, really hard.
Yeah.
So having in there some of the magic helps to make it less, oh my gosh, how has humanity survived?
No, that'll make total sense. And one of the biggest struggles with this story is just combining with the ideas I have with the magic base and the history that I have. Because as I was brainstorming, as I was writing it, they started kind of growing in two separate directions. So that is definitely something I'm going to need to balance. So thank you for that. Okay, story 3 is Dreamweaver. Now, Harquin is your main character for the evening, and she has lived most of her life as a mercenary and a monster hunter. She's quite satisfied with it, and she manages to keep low for most of her life. But it isn't until a recent fight with the Phoenix that leaves her wounded, not mortally, just wounded, that she's placed in the last place she ever wants to be. It's called the City of the Evening Star. It's basically where she was born and where she grew up. And alone without her bandmates and unable to escape, she finds herself at the edge of a knife wielded by someone who used to be your friend. And in order to bargain for her life, she has to agree in order to join on a heist to rob the ruling class of their power, since they have the ability to control people's dreams and keep the populace at bay. And but the twist, as I was writing this, was the ruling class happened to be members of her family. So,
The question is there a barrel full of horse pistons?
that's funny because I could easily see this being like Liza Locklmora, because it'd be based mostly on the city. And in case you're curious, yes, the magic has to do with visiting people's dreams. So
Okay. So this is kind of like a medieval type setting.
yeah.
Alright.
I was thinking like sitting here thinking like a great city in the middle of a desert.
So why did she leave the family in the first place?
That's why you got to read the book. But no, I'm kidding.
That's him saying, I don't know.
Well, my guess is that they were planning on using their powers in order to corrupt and control the city, and she really didn't want to be a part of that. This this part with her family is something that I need to really focus in on, because to me it's probably the most interesting aspect of the story so far. I would very much like the structure just to be around something like the Fall of the House of Usher, where it's like her various parts of the story are based on her interacting and pulling these heists on various members of her family, exploring the relationships she had with each of them, and you get closer and closer to why it is she left. So, minor. Okay. On to story 4, Azure Zen. My first real memory is of my mother holding me as our village burned around us. And so begins the tale of Zenith Desathin, known to the world she drowned as Azure Zen. Now, this is probably one of my ideas where you'll see this particular type of fantasy where I think that the appeal is the name of the main character, Locke Lamora, Quoth King Killer, that kind of thing. And mine's Azure Zen. So, Zen, she was someone who was raised by her grandfather. He basically wanted to use her for his own means in order to secure his own legacy. Her mother was someone who didn't even want her, and yet Zen is put in a position where if she doesn't comply with what her grandfather wants, her mother may not live. And let's see. Oh yeah, I added this little bit about strange voices in the night calling her name, asking her to take up a scarlet sword that was forged in dragon blood. So this story would essentially be someone telling you their life story. I'm planning to cover like a 60-year period of this woman. It goes to different places, like her becoming the leader of 6 dragon hordes, her conquering an empire, her leaving that all behind, and then her being tricked to go on a quest for vengeance after someone who she used to think of as an ally killed her village and her husband. So, and that, yeah, this one I'm very much debating in terms of the structure because in fantasy you can basically just do you know uh, someone telling a story in first person and that's it. But I've been debating about like having a framing story, her talking to someone in the present day about about her life, and you're kind of wondering, well, how did she get here? And then I was also thinking, oh, well, what if this person she was interacting with also added footnotes to the story? So in terms of structure, this one is probably the one I can easily see being the most elaborate, but I'm not sure if that's necessary.
What does the magic system in this story look like?
This one, I kind of go back and forth. It's probably one of the more loose magic systems in the sense of it's more just bonding to various types of dragons. Those 6 dragon hordes that I mentioned, they're like typical dragons with 4 legs and wings. There's also wyverns. There's also just like giant snakes, that kind of thing. They're all part of this dragon dynamic that I looked up and saw based on how many limbs they have. So that's what it is.
Why, why does it say the world she drowned?
Because that's what happened as a result of her quest for vengeance. The world is just completely
Planet? When you say world, you mean planet?
well, the continent she lives on, it's drowned.
Biblical flooding.
Yeah, something like that.
Right?
So like Atlantis sinking, did she sink it? If you flood it, the water runs away. So.
Well, from what I remember of my drafting process, it was like this mystical race tricked her, and I would think of them as more like a water kingdom that sought to rise up and drown the world. So, yeah.
I mean, if you're shifting tectonic plates, you could permanently drown.
Yeah.
Tidal waves and destroy it.
Yeah, yeah.
I just didn't know if you meant that metaphorically or literally.
Mm-hmm. This is a story I kind of wrote out of spite, um, because there's this book series I read, I won't mention here, that I was very frustrated with the direction it took. So I basically drafted all this because I wanted a different direction for that story. So,
What's the series? You gotta tell us now.
it's called The Crimson Empire.
So I think, I guess what I'm struggling with
Mm-hmm.
is clearly the world that she kind of drowns
Mm-hmm.
cares about what she did. But why should I care? So it sounds both interesting and I don't understand enough about why I should.
Mm-hmm.
So is it that she's like is she the hero? Is she the what's her role?
Mm-hmm. I guess what I would figure that the and hmm, it's tough because I think I might have screwed myself over in a sense because I would think that in terms of at least the initial story, the her trying to save her own mother would be the through point. But in terms of finding out her story, I guess my thought was just, oh well, why did she drown the world? You know.
Okay.
Now the strange voices.
Mm-hmm.
Is this something that I assume is supernatural or paranormal?
Mm-hmm.
Are they really considered good or evil or
Well, I think it will depend on how the story plays out. From what I can tell, it's the dragon hordes that are calling her name. So, whether or not they intend ill or the best for her, I'm not too sure yet.
So it seems like you're almost considering doing this one almost like a
Mm-hmm. Fantasy has a long tradition of these people recounting their life story, and this is basically my attempt at doing that.
So you are Azure Zen.
Huh?
You are Azure Zen.
Well, I'm not a woman, but Azure Zen. I don't know. Like I mentioned before, you'll notice that a lot of my protagonists tend to be women. That's mostly just because it helps me get out of my own head when someone's different gender than me. So,
All right, story 5.
story 5, and the last one. This one is called the Black Eagle Empire. Um, Centuries ago, the elves of Near Seer, they cut themselves off from the rest of the world. They abandoned humanity and sealed off paradise forever. Or so they thought, because now the boundary has fallen and paradise isn't what it once was. So this story would focus on Vienna Laurent, and she is someone who remembers what the elves used to be, the ideal that they were supposed to lead the world and help them, basically in their time of need. But in order to do this, she needs to unite the elves themselves. But she's running into a couple problems. One thing, her husband has passed away, and her son is in failing health. So she needs to figure out, how is she gonna secure a legacy beyond ashes. The second character that this story would focus on is this other elf called Arkanalender. He once abdicated a war. No, not a war. He abdicated the throne and then set off to join a war that he hoped to die in. But against all hope, he survived this war, and he's part of the reason why the boundary isn't there anymore. So as he returns home, his brother, the king, wants to use him as a pawn in Vienna's plans. So, and then you have this little thing I added in the end that I'm trying to be epic with. What was, what is, will never be again, but what will be may hold something greater if they are not too late. So, yeah. You guys have read this one. It's basically my second most ambitious of these projects where, I'm trying to do an entire trilogy with this. But I will say that with like a lot of these, but especially with this one, it's one that I really need to come at from a different angle because I'm a much different person here, and a lot of the narrative beats that I originally planned, I no longer want to do. So.
What species are Hannah and Arden?
They're both elves.
They're both elves.
Yeah. Though, what's interesting is that they're not the type of elves that live 1,000 years. Their lifespan is actually more akin to humans. And even though they sealed themselves off from the rest of the world, there were still humans in their population at the time that it happened. And so for a lot of these elves, they have some human mixed in there. And there's even some humans still walking around. Yeah. I originally got this idea because with Lord of the Rings, I always thought of the elves, disappearing into the West and whatnot, and I was like, well, what if people went out to go find them, and they found a fallen race essentially, and that's where this story idea came about.
Now we vote?
Yeah, unless you guys have any other questions about this one.
Rank choice?
Sure, rank them. Yeah, thank you guys for listening. These are the stories.
I like the first one best, personally.
Mm.
I like the last one best.
I'm with Heather. So the magic system in the first story is definitely the most well developed.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Black Eagle also has a magic system, but you don't know about it at the beginning.
it's got the best plot. You sold me on the plot of Black Eagle Empire more than anything.
If we could do as Heather and I suggested, get away from alcohol being the thing.
Mm-hmm.
I like the first one because it seemed, even as you were explaining it, you seemed to understand that better. That's what I heard, is you understood that one better.
Mm-hmm.
Helen, shut up. You can't take all of that.
What's that?
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, which one are you the most interested in, Alan?
I kind of like plants.
Yeah,
Uh,
based on the history or based on the magic.
based on the magic.
Okay.
I think this, when I look through these are all good ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's necessarily we're saying, well, this one's good, and I think one of the things that you probably have to look at for yourself is which one am I interested in most, so that I can keep writing,
Mm-hmm.
so I don't get bogged down, 10 chapters, but keep
Mm-hmm.
because that's the most important thing, especially the first one. You gotta have that momentum.
Yep.
And then once you get that momentum down, when you write the second one, it's gonna go a lot easier.
Oh, for sure. And I will say, just to recap, Ruby Duchess would be a novella. Lancer, I was thinking more as a novella or a short story for now. That could have some expansion. Dreamweaver, just a single novel. Azure Zen and Black Eagle are my trilogies. So.
I like the last two, because I guess I'm a trilogy minded person.
Mm-hmm.
I really think you have the premise
Mm-hmm.
with all of them. If it were me, I would probably start with the Lancer.
Okay.
Because it's fascinating, and if you're thinking about it as a short story, like Alan was saying, getting through to the end, getting that down.
Mm-hmm.
I say this as someone who hasn't yet gotten to an end,
Mm-hmm.
so I really prize that, like, high in the sky kind of thing. But then I would consider doing the Black Eagle Empire, and then I would go back to your Azure Zen. I think the Azure Zen is really fascinating idea, but I think that would be one of those that, depending on how you go about writing it, you either make it or break it. Same idea, just either make or break it. Really, I should be a writer. But by having a little bit more practice, because by that time you'll have, if you did this, right, you have 3 full novels plus a novella that you have written, and then you're starting on that. I think you have a different perspective about how to bring it all together than you would right now.
One of the, I would even say that I'm ranking these in terms of difficulty, with the first one being the hardest and Black Eagle being the hardest because first one being the easiest, whatever. Sorry. Because Black Eagle is the one that, in terms of scope, it has the most characters I'd be playing with, the most consequences, the biggest world that I've developed. So, whereas like something like Ruby Duchess, very narrow, very personal story that I can do. And I think in order to pull off those multi-POVs that I planned here, getting the characterization down in the other stories is really important to me. So. And especially Azure Zen, since this is the only one I think that's written in the first person, that in order for that story to work, I would very much need to hone in on who Zen is, because I feel like, at least in my description, I'm struggling with that a little bit. Yeah. Yeah.
I want to read all of them.
I think you've read some of them.
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Tomorrow?
Yeah.
Next
all
week.
tomorrow.
Next week.
Yeah. Very quick, but
All right.
very